welcome to another episode, another interview brought to you by Space Sheets, where we are bringing you different professionals working in the space industry. I have with me a special friend, Numa, joining me for today's episode. Numa is a space lawyer, which I find very, very cool. I can call you a space lawyer, right?
Space avocat, but
Space
lawyer.
avocat, yeah. That's what we prefer, but I think space law is very, very important, and it's one of my very favorite topics when it is the space industry. So before I jump into that, how is it going for you here?
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here with you in a very dense and packed week at the AAC Milan. I think we have like 12,000 people here.
Yeah.
So it's usually 5-minute meetings. So I'm very glad that we have time to discuss more about law and about everything that we do together. So it's going good, meeting with people, meeting with clients, agencies, very diverse crowd here. That's the plus of AAC. So we can meet a lot of people from diverse continents, diverse backgrounds, so that's what makes it very rich event.
Yes. And how, Numa, has your journey been as a space lawyer?
I actually graduated master's degree in space and telecommunication from Paris-Saclay University. So that's where I got my first impression on the, especially on the space sector. But it was in 2011. So back in the day, the space sector was very different from what it is right now.
Yes.
Then I went working especially in public affairs for the telecommunication industry. And that's when I became an attorney in 2018 that I started to take interest on what was going on in the space industry from a legal standpoint. And after a few years working for another attorney, I decided that it was time to create my own practice. And it was time also to maybe make a different proposition to the market. Because I noticed that the space industry is very technical, a lot of stress, because you have a lot of deadlines. It's short deadline but long projects, so you need to be really careful on that. There is a lot of regulation, of course. Space industry is highly regulated. You can understand that when you launch a rocket, it can be a missile, so there's all the dual use regulation, etc. But I noticed that there were actually no small firm dedicated, no boutique firm dedicated to the space industry. Because when you are an industry player in space, you need to have legal advice from somebody that actually knows your sector and your industry.
We have now so many more players and so many new industries and companies joining in. Policy and law become even more crucial. So 2 questions here. One, what do you think have been the major changes that you have seen in the industry, and where does that put space law and policy? Which position does it put, and how important does it make for us to have and look at space law and policy?
First one, regarding the evolution of the industry. Basically 2 big things. The first one is global competition, as you said. It's no longer a closed club. You can see it today. If you take the hugeness of this event, you have big agencies like NASA, the CNES, indeed, but you have like more smaller agencies, but with a lot of activities there. You have Azerbaijan, you have Spain, you have Catalonia, you have a country from South America, you have Southeast Asia also. So of course you have big player like India. So it's very diverse. It's very diverse, and the competition is global, meaning that you can have a lot of different actors from different backgrounds on the same segment. And the second one is really disruptive services. So as a lawyer, as you know, our daily job is basically to draft contract, to negotiate, and everything. To all my clients, when we start working together, I tell them, okay, what do you do? What is your technology? What is your value proposal? And especially when you are in a new space world, but now it's the entire ecosystem of space is in this trend. You have a lot of disruptive, unorthodox use of space, new way to use satellite data, to use captors. Everything is disruptive, and you as an attorney to draft contracts, to have terms and conditions that are actually compliant also with the law. And you can feel, and that goes to your second question regarding the evolution of policies and law. It's I would say sometimes it's difficult to catch up, because if you take a situation, you see, okay, what is the law regulating this new service, this new device, this new launcher, etc. Then sometimes it may be not really up to date. So the only tool you have as an attorney is contract. So that's a very creative job that you are doing. It's based on a dialogue with the
Yes.
client. You need really to take time. That's why I was mentioning it was really the purpose of Space Avocat, not to consider itself as a law firm. We are considering ourselves as a space company, but only delivering legal services. So that's a different mindset because the idea is really to have a constant dialogue with entrepreneurs, with company, even if they are more legacy. We have very diverse clients, but they all have the same issues. They need to be understood in the context of the space industry. So then, at the moment, you can deliver very accurate and tailored legal services.
Okay.
So yeah,
Very good answer.
thank you so much. Global competition, disruptive services in a very and this evolving context really impact the legal services.
Yeah.
You need to be more proactive, and for that, the best tool you have is contract. Because the regulation,
Right.
we see that in France. So in France, we have this major law, which is the loi sur les opérations spatiales. This summer, maybe you watched that on one of my podcasts, we discussed with the French ministry that actually updated the regulation, but it took some time,
Right.
and it takes a lot of discussion with the stakeholders. So that's why, in the meantime, as an attorney, your only tool is contract.
This contract. I'm just very curious about this whole thing that we talk a lot about collaboration, and space is a global common. We need something which is more globally that can work for everybody. But as more and more players come in, everybody will come in with a certain background approach which will be different for their region, for them, than somebody else. And their goals and visions might be different as well. So, how do we come at a consensus law and policy regulation situation, but at the same time make sure that we are not missing out on their personal visions and goals? So I find this whole net of thing, while I think it can all come together also probably, but how do you navigate that? Because you're right at the center of these laws and regulations and policy, and now as we are becoming more active, we need these.
Nations, even if they are not big space power like India, like France, like the US, it's actually good that they create a framework. It can be minimum.
Yeah.
I always advise to have a minimum regulation, not to have something that is too much, because the problem is law and regulation are good to secure space activities. And if they are too much, as you were mentioning, it's a global theme. So you have what we call forum shopping, meaning that sometimes legitimately, some space company may say, okay, I will not invest in this country anymore because there are so many regulations that it already costs me so much money to invest. If I need to pay a 20-25% more just in an effort to comply with regulation, that it can be too much. But countries are really keen to find this balance, but it can be complicated. So that's why it's always good when you want to start on a national level a space program to think about, hey, maybe I should have a space law which is just stating that there is an agency or there is a bureau,
Right.
and if you want to launch something in outer space, come and have a discussion in order for you to get a license. That's very basic, but I think it's very legit from each government, each sovereign nation to have this perspective, especially if they are signatories of the United Nations instruments. So they have to do that. So I think that's very good that there is a global movement. But as you rightfully mentioned, you need some coherence. Sometimes it's an higher level, like regional or global.
Yes.
My opinion is that since we have so much private activities right now, you're going to have national laws, and you have within this national ecosystem, you have a lot of practice or legal practice.
Yeah.
And for me, this legal practice is influencing the national laws. And for me, at the longer term, some similar country may have aligned interest and may want to have regional or interest-oriented agreement. The best example for me is the Artemis Accord.
Yeah.
Artemis Accord is it's not a treaty, it's just an agreement. It's very light and non-binding agreement. But that really shows an interpretation. There will be some sort of, it's a vision. And I think this is one, it's a very clever way from the American to have done that. I regret personally that there is not a European version of that, maybe one day. Because you can have the geographic union on this. Southeast Asian country, European countries, but space is more than that. Take for instance France and India. We are not in the same continent, but the CNES and ISRO are basically sister agencies. So there is a very deep relationship between the two countries. So maybe we can have a mutual understanding in the future from a legal standpoint. We don't know.
Yeah. You're also part of the International Space University, ISU, and you've interacted with students. So, students who are interested in law and policy, specifically in the space industry, what are your suggestions for them? What kind of courses they should look at, and why is it important for us to have more people understanding this?
Well, ISU, it was like I had a great time there. I actually did last year the executive education course. It's
Yes.
like a week.
Yes.
The good thing is that you have like very nice classes, but you also have a network, and that's very important in this
Yeah.
industry. As you have seen, ISU, it's a huge event, but it's actually a family.
Yes,
It's a
it
very
is,
community.
it is.
Space is like a community. Sometimes maybe people criticize and say it's a too close community, but it's nevertheless
Yeah.
a community of this sort. So it's very important to have this, and ISU is really provided you this network of alumni, and that's a great leverage that you can have
Yeah.
in your career. If you want to have like fundamental education in space law, I would indeed recommend Professor Achille's master's degree at Paris-Saclay, which is quite amazing because it's a mix between space and telecommunication. So you can have two very complementary industry, and you learn more about the core dynamics of these two industries, which are actually quite linked.
Right.
Telecommunication industry is a network industry, space is not, but with the current evolution, we talk about mega constellations.
Yes.
We have also some sort of constellation on the ground. We have companies that are
Yeah.
doing captors on the ground.
Yeah.
So there is now this spirit of and this logic of network. So that's
Yeah.
interesting to have this theoretical approach. It's also a master which is very connected to the industry,
Yes.
because you need to have internship and traineeship. So it's very interesting. Of course, you have other, I would not say competing program, but you have other like friendly programs which are like Leiden indeed,
yeah.
McGill in Canada. You have Nebraska
Yeah.
in the US. So that would be the choice. I think it's really important to consider a choice depending where you are in your career.
Right.
If you are looking for like the first layer of education in space law, it will be better to look at university such as Paris-Saclay or
Right.
Leiden.
Right.
If you want to have a more professional approach, ISU can be quite amazing. It can be also a good complement. I know they have summer studies. So yeah, it's very important to try to find this type of program,
Right.
and actually to leverage the network. I always say to the students, it's great to learn. You have to really dig in the topic and the material, but it's not everything. You need to leverage the network. Your colleagues, your friend, they can be your partner, they can be then your client, they can be your customer or your boss. So that's something very important for you to have in mind.
Right. And now I had this question in between also that when we're talking about having global regulations and policies, and you mentioned about Artemis, but Artemis right now, like you said, is not a binding thing.
That's it all.
So, do we have like any? I know we have Scopus that regularly discusses these things. We have UNOSA, but I don't think any of them can have the authority. Are they binding in any sense of coming up with any regulations or laws right now in space? Or
Space, as we were saying, is a very global community. It's very interconnected, but the problem is sometimes they work too much in silo.
yeah,
You know,
that's what.
so it's good to have a forum to discuss this. But if you take another example of international regulation, you have ITU.
Yeah,
ITU is working
ITU is
very well.
yeah.
It's a very complex and elaborated mechanism that works quite well. And today, yesterday, or during this week at AAC, there are several presentations from ITU. There was one on the spectrum regulation on the moon. So this agency is doing the very routine work of frequency coordination, and also trying to explore new outcomes. So that's quite interesting. But global regulation per se, it's long to achieve, and I think it will be more, at least nowadays, on a regional level or interest based.
Right. Okay. Now, before I close, because I can keep going on and take all your time in talking about this, because I love this, my favorite subject to discuss about. I would want to close on the last question being, what has been the most interesting, whether it could be in terms of client or like a case or a situation that you came across as a space lawyer and you had to deal with and navigate around? You can also talk.
It's a very, very complicated question because, attorney, we are bound by highly important secrecy, professional secrecy, confidentiality.
Which is why I said, which you can
I would say if I take,
mention.
let's take a more global, more general context.
Yeah.
In the job, all the situation of the entrepreneur are interesting, or the company per se are interesting. okay, what is very marking is when you are helping company building their first space program. Like they want to send a proof of concept.
Yeah.
It's their first launch. You have something which is quite moving because you are working for days and weeks on contract, and then one day you're lucky enough to see what you wrote on paper become something real, launch, and operational. So that's something that is really marking when you are an attorney, because you're like, okay, I'm not only here to argue and to draft during the night the contract, you're also here to watch what's going to happen, to help actually people. And the way I see the role of an attorney is not to ban and to prevent people from doing it. I don't see law as a burden. I think law is a tool. It can be difficult, it can be heavy, but if you use it wisely, it can be a very, very serious competitive advantage for your company. So I always advise my client, okay, I know it's tough. I know this contract is taking a lot of energy, a lot of resources, but when it's going to be completed, when it's going to be signed, you can go on and keep on your progress. So yeah, that's a really moving part of the job when you see it going live, in the sky.
That's a very exciting.
It's very exciting.
All right, Numa, thank you so much
Thank you.
for taking the time and
Of
for
course.
talking to me here.